Hey guys, Peter here to do an album review. Today I'm here to tell you about the latest from Obscura, a Valediction, out November 19th on Nuclear Blast. This album has 11 tracks, 52 minutes in length, and this is the band's 6th full-length studio album. They are a German prog technical death metal band. Now this is a record that offers a lot of diversity in the structure and in the soundscape. Outside of 2 songs, every other track could go anywhere you want. The impact on the record as far as the playability is concerned would stay exactly the same. Those 2 songs are Forsaken, the opening track, and Heritage, the closing track. They have a lot of similarities in their construction and in the elements that drive them. They both use acoustic guitars to introduce you to the song and introduce you to the album, to exit the song, to exit the album. Because of that, they are the bookends of this record. Everything in the middle, you can move around and nothing would really change. This is an album that puts the listener on the driver's seat. You're in charge of your own experience. You can go from top to bottom, but you can move things around. The diversity of the record really helps you not have a clear path or not have a straightforward path that you have to take in order for the album to make sense and in order for you to get the most out of this record. Once you get into the soundscape, you start to see that diversity that I was speaking of. It's in the structure, but it's definitely more so in the sound that it carries. The album has prog elements, it has technical elements, it has death metal elements, and it has everything in between. Just a lot of diversity of sound with not having one clear-cut driver that ignites the record or that becomes the spinal cord of this album. There's a little bit of everything for everybody as far as sound goes. Because of that, you see a little bit of a departure from previous records where I felt that they were a little bit more contained, they had more of a theme, they had more of a concept, and because of that, they were more tied into where they needed to go and they stayed on that path from beginning to end. This record is free of chains. It doesn't have anything really tying it down. Because of that, the sound can go anywhere they want it to go. So creativity really is the only driver of the experience of these tracks and of this record. The only consistency that I found within the overall diversity of sound is how big the volume feels and how well defined all the elements are. When you listen to this record, you can hear the bass, you can hear the drums, you can hear the guitars, you can hear the vocals. Everything is coming at you almost in a different lane, and then you're able to process all of those elements coming at you as one as well. So it's a very rich sounding record from that perspective, and it's very balanced in that approach and that execution from beginning all the way to the end. Within the sound, 2 elements drive the experience, or at least they're the catalysts of this experience and of this diversity. The bass and the guitars. I want to start off with the bass because when you have changes to the band, when you have lineup changes, there's always the fear that it's going to impact the overall sound and execution. I felt that the bass on this record not necessarily sounds better than in previous records, but the execution in terms of how it's recorded, mixed, and put together with all the other elements definitely surpasses what they've done in the past. You could feel, you could hear the bass weave itself in from layer to layer, going from the back end of the track into the forefront, jumping the guitars, jumping the vocals, then going into the middle, in between the guitars, then dropping all the way back again, then coming again back on top. It just weaves itself track in and track out, and that gives a lot of life, that gives a lot of warmth. It makes the sound overall feel a lot richer, and that's a very important element that this album has to offer because it's right in the forefront, really easy for the listener to detect, understand, and then gravitate towards it. The guitars felt a little bit more diverse, but they're the ones really dictating the diversity of the album in terms of where it's going, moving from that prog side to the technical side to the straight up death metal side. I always felt the guitars were the ones leading those charges and really dictating where these songs are going to go more so than anything else. So they have more of a conductor style approach in the overall construction of the album, but the guitar execution is also outstanding on this record. Incredible solos that felt sometimes outside the box, but this is an album that it's really outside the box when you look at the band. So everything kind of felt in place. It's almost like chaos becomes the norm. So there's a little bit of that in terms of how the guitars come across, in terms of how they sound, in terms of how they feel. On top of that, you have Stefan on vocals, and he's very diverse on this album with clean, harsh, screaming. But to me, it was not the diversity of vocal approach that really impacted or that had an immediate noticeable effect on how I perceived his songs, was rather how raw it felt to me. He felt unrestrained. He felt more natural, it felt more organic, he felt stronger, he felt better, he felt free. And that sense is something that stays consistent from beginning to end, regardless of where he takes his vocal range and regardless of where that vocal range takes the songs. This record feels to me like an album that it's going to take some time for you to get into it. At least it did for me. If you're a fan of the band and you're coming from previous records into this one, this is going to feel like it's a little bit outside the box, like I said before. Because of that, it's going to take a few more times for you to go through it before you catch what the band is trying to do and before you understand exactly where you are within the context of the album. It's not an album that really tells you what you need to do. You kind of have to understand it on your own and then define how you're going to attack the record. So because of that, I just feel like this album may take a little bit longer for you to understand it, for you to really enjoy it, for you to really capture the essence of it. Once you do, you're hooked, because it has so many things to offer, it has so many different layers, and every time you listen to it, you're going to discover something slightly different from the previous time. So it's an album that's going to take some time, but that doesn't impact the quality that it holds. It's different from previous records, it's going into a different direction, but that doesn't necessarily make it bad, it just makes it different and unique within itself and within the context of the band. It's still an Obscura record, it still has the band's DNA, it's just tweaked here and there in order for you to get different sides of the band and not just one single angle. Once you get into the favorite songs, I have 3 tracks that offer something slightly different from one another, and this will help you get an understanding of what this album is all about. Starting off with When Stars Collide, a song that has clean vocals. The clean vocals are so melodic, the sound around them make them even more melodic, and that really becomes a beacon within the track. But it's not the only great thing about the track. This song has great tempo. The bass, the weaving of the bass that I mentioned earlier is definitely present on this song. You hear it, you feel it moving in and out, and really becomes one of the decisive factors on how strong this song feels and the impact that it has. The guitars lead the way, but that bass weaving is just outstanding from beginning all the way to the end. The bass does a lot of switching while the guitars feel a little bit more contained, a little bit more balanced. So it's an interesting dynamic between the two, but a dynamic that then translates into the overall dynamic of the track, and then the dynamic of the track translates itself into the dynamic of the solo section that's just phenomenal. It really expands the song, it makes the track feel bigger, it gives it a larger footprint, and it allows you to kind of lose yourself within the track without losing necessarily sense of where you are within the track. Really interesting element of this track that makes the song overall feel very complete. Next you have Devoured Usurper, heaviest track, hands down, heaviest song on this album. If you're wondering what's going to be the heaviest song on the album, this is it, straight up death metal. There's nothing else to it. There's no prog, there's no technical, just straight up death metal, musically and vocally. That's what the song brings. Even as far as the structure goes, it has a very traditional death metal structure to it. A track that's robust, that's heavy, that's powerful, that never loses that feeling, that feels very demolished at times, and it definitely carries its weight all the way from the beginning to the end. Last but not least, we have Orbital Elements II, an instrumental track, a track that sets itself apart from everything else. Not because it's instrumental, or not just because it's instrumental, but because of the sound that it has. It almost feels very Megadeth-ish at times, the way the guitars sound, very Marty Friedman-like, if you will. I love this track because of the difference that it offers, because the sound is completely different. It sets itself apart. It breaks what is happening within this record. It gives even perhaps a little bit more volatility, but a different kind of volatility, if you will, because it's a more contained volatility than everything else that was happening on the album that will happen after this song is finished. First time I listened to the album, I felt like this track perhaps should be in the middle of the record as a breaking point. The more I listened to it, the more it felt right to me to be more towards the end of the album. It has more of a classic approach from that matter. If we look at albums for Metallica, for example, where they have Orion, it comes more towards the end of the record. It doesn't necessarily break the album. So I like the fact that this is a track that has different qualities to it, that has a different vibe, and that sets itself apart with the beauty, with the melody, with how the guitars sound, with how they come across. There's no other song that even comes close to sounding the way this one does. This is it. This is Obscura with their latest record. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.